It builds slowly, so slowly you almost don't notice. And then, one morning, the question arrives. Stairs that were once invisible begin to register in the legs. A flight you climbed without thinking now asks something of you. It's a small change, but it's a real one. By mid-afternoon, focus drifts. The coffee sits untouched. And somewhere in the back of the mind, a question begins to form. This is not laziness. It's something the body is trying to say. Persistent fatigue is one of the most common reasons adults over 40 visit a doctor. Millions search for answers every single day. You are not alone in asking. Most people assume tiredness is simply part of getting older, an unavoidable tax on the years. But that assumption, however common, turns out to be dangerously incomplete. There's no diagnosis called tired because you're older. What exists instead is a wide landscape of possibilities. Some benign, some treatable, some serious. All worth understanding. Inside every cell, tiny structures called mitochondria generate the body's energy. With age, they become slightly less efficient. But on their own, they almost never produce the kind of exhaustion that disrupts a life. Hormones drift gently downward across decades. Testosterone in men, estrogen and progesterone in women, thyroid, cortisol, growth hormone, subtle shifts, rarely dramatic ones. And yet, tasks that once felt effortless begin to demand more. Carrying groceries, climbing porch steps. The action hasn't changed. The system carrying it has. This is sarcopenia, the slow loss of skeletal muscle that begins around the 4th decade of life. Less muscle means a smaller engine, and a smaller engine works harder for the same result. The heart's maximum output also drifts down. Vessels lose elasticity. Oxygen reaches working tissues with slightly less efficiency than it did at 25. The margins narrow. And then there is the lived experience, a weight that no rest seems to lift, eyes that close in the middle of the afternoon for reasons hard to explain. But fatigue does not look the same in every body. For some, it's physical heaviness. For others, mental fog. For others still, a flatness of motivation that no willpower can move. These are not interchangeable feelings. They arise from different mechanisms. They point in different directions. And the body, in nearly every case, is trying to say something. Among the most common drivers of age-related fatigue is poor sleep. Not the kind from a late night out. The kind that arrives even when the hours in bed look perfectly normal. Sleep architecture itself changes with age. Deep, slow-wave sleep, the most restorative phase, diminishes after middle age. You can sleep 8 hours and still wake up unrested. And then there is sleep apnea. During the night, the soft tissue of the throat relaxes and intermittently blocks airflow, sometimes dozens of times per hour, sometimes hundreds. Most people experiencing it don't remember waking. They only know that morning after morning, the day begins already exhausted. Medication is another overlooked contributor. Blood pressure drugs, antihistamines, sleep aids, painkillers, each prescribed for good reason, each capable of dulling alertness on its own. And when several are taken together, as is common after 60, the cumulative effect can be significant. The total burden on energy is rarely examined as a whole. There are also quieter contributors: iron deficiency, low vitamin B12, low vitamin D. Each of them capable of producing fatigue, each of them invisible without a blood test. Even mild chronic dehydration can play a role. With age, the sensation of thirst weakens, blood volume falls, The cardiovascular system works a little harder to do the same work. For some people, fatigue stabilizes at a new lower level. For others, it fluctuates. Good days alternating with bad ones, often with no clear pattern and no obvious explanation. This unpredictability has a cost. Plans get canceled and rescheduled. The week becomes harder to organize. And quietly, the calendar starts to fill with question marks. Social engagements decline. Hobbies are postponed. Conversations that used to feel easy now feel like effort. Life, almost imperceptibly, begins to shrink. There is also a quieter toll. People begin to wonder if they are aging too quickly, if they are becoming a burden, if something is wrong that no one has noticed yet. Driving begins to feel less safe, especially after dark. Reaction time slows. Concentration fades. Independence, which once felt automatic, starts to feel fragile. Fatigue can also feed on itself. Tiredness affects mood. Low mood worsens sleep. Poor sleep deepens fatigue. The loop tightens until the original cause is hard to see at all. None of this means something terrible is happening. Often it doesn't. But it does mean the fatigue is worth understanding, rather than simply accepted. To understand age-related fatigue, it helps to see the body not as a single machine, but as a network. Heart, lungs, thyroid, blood, brain, each with its own role, each with its own way of failing quietly. The thyroid is a small gland at the base of the neck, butterfly-shaped, easy to miss, but it functions as a master regulator of metabolism for the entire body. When it underperforms, in a condition called hypothyroidism, everything slows. The body feels colder, the mind feels slower, and tiredness becomes pervasive in a way that no amount of sleep fully resolves. Energy also depends on the body's ability to use sugar. In type 2 diabetes, cells become resistant to insulin. Glucose remains in the blood. The cells, paradoxically, are starving for fuel. This is why fatigue from blood sugar problems often peaks after meals. The body struggles to process the load. The eyelids grow heavy. The chair becomes harder to leave. The heart, in early heart failure, doesn't stop working. It simply can't keep up. Blood flow falls, oxygen delivery slips, and the first sign is often nothing more dramatic than everything feeling harder than it used to. A walk that felt easy a year ago now requires a pause. A hand drifts to the chest, not in pain, but in awareness. Something has changed. The lungs follow a similar logic. Conditions like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease reduce the oxygen entering the bloodstream. The result, often, is fatigue mistaken for being out of shape. Anemia deserves its own attention. It means the blood carries fewer red cells or less hemoglobin than it should. Less oxygen reaches the muscles. Less oxygen reaches the brain. The tank, in effect, runs lower than it appears. The experience can be distinctive: breathlessness with mild effort, dizziness on standing, a heart that races too easily, cold hands, cold feet, subtle but persistent. And no honest discussion of fatigue is complete without mental health. In older adults, depression doesn't always look like sadness. It often looks like tiredness, body aches, a quiet withdrawal from activities once enjoyed. The connections become tangled. Pain disrupts sleep. Sleep loss worsens mood. Low mood deepens fatigue. These loops are part of why fatigue resists simple explanations. This is where careful evaluation begins. A thorough history, the pattern of the fatigue, the medications taken, the sleep, the mood, the recent changes in life that might matter. Then come the tests,
a complete blood count for anemia, thyroid function, blood sugar, kidney and liver markers, vitamin levels, inflammation, sometimes more depending on what surfaces.
In some cases, a sleep study is added. Sensors track breathing, oxygen, and brain activity through the night. The goal is not a single answer. It is to map the full picture and find which parts of it can be changed. And in most cases, much can be done. The body at 60, 70, or 80 is not simply winding down. It is a system in which many variables can shift, sometimes dramatically, with the right interventions. When a thyroid disorder is identified, hormone replacement can restore energy levels in a matter of weeks. The change can feel almost like turning a light back on. When blood sugar is the driver, careful management through nutrition, movement, or medication can change the day-to-day experience meaningfully. The fog begins to lift. For sleep apnea, a CPAP machine, or in some cases an oral appliance, can transform sleep. And with that, the morning, the afternoon, and the entire shape of the day. Medication review is one of the most underappreciated interventions in older adults. A careful look with a doctor or pharmacist sometimes reveals that fatigue is being caused or worsened by drugs that are no longer needed in the same way. Then there is exercise. The paradox is real. How can someone exhausted possibly benefit from moving more? And yet, the evidence is consistent. Regular, gentle movement improves energy, sleep, mood, and circulation, all at once. Nutrition matters too. Adequate protein supports muscle. Hydration supports circulation. Correcting documented deficiencies removes biochemical bottlenecks. None of this requires extreme diets, just attention. But not all fatigue should be quietly managed at home. There are warning signs that change the level of urgency, signs that should not wait. Fatigue accompanied by chest pain, pressure, or tightness deserves immediate medical attention. It can signal a cardiac event or worsening heart disease. Shortness of breath that is new, progressive, or appears at rest is another red flag. Fainting episodes, sudden weakness on one side of the body. These are not symptoms to absorb in silence. Confusion or disorientation, especially if it appears alongside fatigue, can point to metabolic problems, medication issues, or neurological conditions. It calls for prompt evaluation. Unintentional weight loss. More than 5% of body weight in 6 to 12 months without a clear cause should always be investigated. Loose-fitting clothes can be the first quiet signal. But the larger truth beneath all of this is hopeful. Tiredness, even persistent tiredness, almost always has a reason. And in most cases, that reason is something that can be identified, addressed, or improved. What it asks for is partnership. A clinician willing to look broadly. A patient willing to be heard and to participate. Fatigue, taken seriously, becomes a starting point, not a sentence. So if there's one thing to carry forward, it is this. Persistent tiredness is not a character flaw, and it is not a mandatory feature of getting older. It is a signal, and it is worth listening to. If you've been feeling tired all the time, or you have other unexplained symptoms that worry you, share your experience in the comments. And let us know what symptom or medical topic you'd like explained next. If this video helped, subscribe for more calm, clear explanations.